1. April 10, 1912. Titanic leaves Southampton. On April 10, 1912, the RMS Titanic left Southampton, England, beginning her maiden voyage to New York. At the time, she was the largest passenger ship in the world. She was a floating symbol of luxury, power, and modern engineering. On board were more than 2,200 people, including wealthy first-class passengers, immigrants hoping for a new life in America, and hundreds of crew members keeping the ship running. To the people watching from the docks, Titanic looked unstoppable. But just 4 days later, that same ship would be lying at the bottom of the Atlantic. 2. April 14th, 9:40 p.m. Ice warnings are sent on the night of April 14th. Titanic was sailing through the North Atlantic. The ship had already received several warnings about ice in the area. One of the most important warnings came from another ship, the Mesaba. It reported heavy pack ice and large icebergs in Titanic's path. But the message never reached the bridge. The wireless operators were busy sending passenger messages, and the warning was not treated with the urgency it needed. Titanic continued forward at high speed. The ocean was calm. The sky was dark. There was no moon. And somewhere ahead, an iceberg was waiting. 3. 11:39 p.m. The iceberg is spotted. At 11:39 p.m., look out. Frederick Fleet saw something in the darkness. A shape directly ahead of the ship. An iceberg. He rang the warning bell 3 times and called the bridge. His message was simple: iceberg right ahead. On the bridge, First Officer William Murdoch had only seconds to react. He ordered the ship to turn. But Titanic was massive, moving fast, and the iceberg was already dangerously close. The ship began to turn, but not quickly enough. 4. 11:40 p.m. Titanic hits the iceberg. At 11:40 p.m., Titanic struck the iceberg. It was not a huge head-on crash like many people imagine. Instead, the iceberg scraped along the starboard side of the ship. To some passengers, it felt like a vibration. Some heard a grinding noise. Others barely noticed anything at all. But below the waterline, the damage was deadly. The iceberg caused the hull plates to buckle, opening the ship to the sea. Titanic had been designed to survive several flooded compartments, but too many were now filling with water. From this moment, the ship was doomed. 5. 11:50 p.m. Thomas Andrews realizes the truth. After the collision, Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, inspected the damage. He understood Titanic better than almost anyone on board. And what he found was terrifying. Water was pouring into the forward compartments. The ship could not stay afloat. Andrews reportedly told Captain Edward Smith that Titanic had maybe an hour or 2 left. This was the moment the disaster became unavoidable. The ship could not be saved. Now, the only question was, how many people could escape? 6. 12:05 a.m. Passengers are told to go to the lifeboats. Shortly after midnight, the order was given to prepare the lifeboats. Passengers were told to put on life jackets and come up to the boat deck. But many still did not understand the danger. Titanic looked safe. The lights were still on. The ship did not seem like it was about to sink. Some passengers refused to get into the lifeboats because the freezing ocean looked more dangerous than the ship itself. That confusion would cost lives. Titanic had lifeboat space for only around half the people on board. Even if every boat was filled completely, there still would not be enough room for everyone. 7. 12:40 a.m. The first lifeboat leaves half empty. At around 12:40 a.m., the first lifeboat was lowered. It could hold around 65 people, but it left with only about 28. This is one of the most frustrating parts of the Titanic disaster. At the start, some lifeboats left half empty. Passengers were unsure whether the ship was really sinking. Crew members were uncertain about how much weight the boats could hold, and many people simply did not want to leave the safety of the ship. Every empty seat was a missed chance to save a life. As the night went on, the fear grew, but by then, precious time had already been lost. 8. 1:30 a.m. panic begins to rise. By 1:30 a.m., the truth was obvious. Titanic's bow was sinking lower into the water. The deck was tilting. Passengers could feel the ship changing beneath their feet. Families were separated. Women and children were placed into lifeboats, while husbands, fathers, and sons stayed behind. The wireless operators were still sending distress calls, hoping another ship could reach them in time. The Carpathia was on its way, but it was too far away. Titanic was running out of time. 2:18 a.m., Titanic breaks apart. At around 2:18 a.m., Titanic's lights went out. For more than 2 hours, the ship had stayed lit in the darkness. Then suddenly, everything went black. The bow was underwater, and the stern had risen high into the air. The strain on the ship became too much. Titanic split in two. The front section sank first, disappearing into the deep. The stern briefly settled back, then rose again. Hundreds of people were still on board, clinging to anything they could find. The final moments had begun. 2:20 a.m., Titanic sinks. At 2:20 a.m., Titanic disappeared beneath the Atlantic. The largest ship in the world was gone. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the screams. Hundreds of people were now in the freezing water. The temperature was so cold that most people had only minutes before cold shock and hypothermia took over. Some lifeboats had space to return and rescue more people, but many were afraid of being overwhelmed by desperate swimmers. Only a small number of people were pulled from the water alive. Later that morning, the Carpathia arrived and rescued around 700 survivors. More than 1,500 people were dead. The Titanic disaster was not caused by just one mistake. It was a chain of failures. Ice warnings were not handled properly. The ship was traveling fast through dangerous waters. There were not enough lifeboats. The evacuation was confused, and help arrived too late. Titanic left Southampton as a symbol of human achievement. But by the morning of April 15th, she had become a warning. A warning about overconfidence, a warning about ignoring danger, and a reminder that even the strongest things in the world can fail. At 11:40 p.m., Titanic struck the iceberg. At 2:20 a.m., she was gone. And in less than 3 hours, history changed forever. If you found this timeline interesting, like the video and subscribe for more explained history videos. Please feel free to leave a comment on what we should explain next.